The K-pop universe is holding its breath. For years, BTS has sat comfortably on the golden throne, breaking unimaginable records and reshaping music history. But as the Titans pause for military service and solo journeys, a massive power vacuum has opened up. The ultimate crown is just sitting there gleaming, and the fierce battle to claim it has already begun. Who actually has the raw talent, the unbreakable fandom loyalty, and the explosive global firepower to step up? Are we witnessing the dawn of a brand new era, or is this just a temporary uprising before the king's return? Which 7 ambitious groups are sharpening their swords right now to snatch the title of the next worldwide sensation? Let's dive right into the ultimate battle for supremacy.
Number 7. Stray Kids, the self-made thunder shaking the foundations. Imagine a storm brewing not from the heavens, but from a small, dimly lit recording studio in Seoul, where 3 teenagers refuse to sleep, furiously typing away at their MIDI keyboards and writing lyrics that bled with teenage angst, fierce rebellion, and a desperate hunger to be heard. This is the visceral, unadulterated origin of Stray Kids, a group that didn't just politely walk into the highly manicured K-pop industry. They kicked the door off its heavy hinges with a genre-defying sound that critics initially dismissed with a wave of their hands as mere noise, only to watch in absolute paralyzed awe as that very noise became the undeniable, unifying anthem of a global youth revolution. When we talk about filling the colossal, history-making shoes left by BTS, we absolutely must talk about the raw currency of authenticity, and Stray Kids bleeds authenticity from every single pore of their existence. Formed through a grueling, emotionally taxing survival show in 2017, these 8 boys didn't just have their debut handed to them on a shiny silver platter by a corporate boardroom. They fought tooth and nail, shedding real tears and facing the terrifying prospect of elimination for their fundamental right to exist as a unified, unbreakable front. This harrowing beginning intimately mirrors the very underdog spirit that propelled BTS from a struggling, nearly bankrupt company to the absolute apex of global domination. At the beating, fiery core of this relentless juggernaut is 3 Racha, the mastermind trinity of Bangtan, Changbin, and Han, who shoulder the unimaginable burden of writing, composing, and producing almost every single track in their incredibly expansive discography. This staggering level of creative control and musical autonomy is an extreme rarity in the tightly controlled, factory-like K-pop machine, instantly making them the true, undeniable musical heirs to BTS's deeply personal, self-produced legacy. But what truly sets Stray Kids apart in this bloody battle for the crown, and what makes them a terrifyingly strong contender, is their sheer, unapologetic audacity to be entirely themselves. They took the industry's mockery of their noise music and meticulously forged it into a weapon of mass destruction, pioneering their own signature mala taste sound, spicy, numbing, wildly unpredictable, and completely dangerously addictive. Tracks like the explosive God's Menu, the culturally rich Thunderous, and the rebellious Miro aren't just standard pop songs. They are high-octane, adrenaline-fueled cinematic experiences that grab you roughly by the collar and refuse to let go. This sonic assault is perfectly propelled by Felix's Mariana's trench-deep, cavernous vocals that shock the system of any first-time listener, and Hunjin's mesmerizing, razor-sharp stage presence that feels exactly like watching dark poetry in violent, beautiful motion. But the machinery of Stray Kids doesn't stop there. It is a perfectly balanced ecosystem of raw talent. You have Lino, the strict and passionate dance leader who ensures every single movement is executed with lethal, bone-breaking precision, while Sungmin's steady, emotional vocal evolution provides a soaring, emotional anchor amidst the chaos, and the youngest, IN, whose growth from a nervous teenager to a confident, commanding performer represents
represents the very journey of the group itself. Let's talk about the cold, hard facts, because the statistics backing their campaign for the throne are absolutely staggering and undeniable, proving beyond a shadow of a doubt that this isn't just some fleeting niche internet phenomenon. They have achieved the near impossible Herculean feat of scoring multiple consecutive #1 albums on the fiercely competitive US Billboard 200 chart, with absolute masterpieces like Ordinary, Maxident, 5-Star, and Rockstar. This is a historic milestone that violently rips them out of the K-pop box and places them in the same rarefied, oxygen-deprived air as global pop music titans. They are no longer just participating in the game, they are dictating the rules, headlining massive, world-renowned global festivals like Lollapalooza Paris and BST Hyde Park in London, commanding oceans of tens of thousands of fans who scream every single complex Korean lyric with a chest-thumping, tear-inducing devotion. Their domination isn't just restricted to the musical realm either. They have seamlessly infiltrated the highest echelons of global high fashion, with members becoming the glittering faces of luxury houses like Versace, Louis Vuitton, and Tommy Hilfiger, proving their cultural impact stretches far beyond a catchy chorus. Their fandom, affectionately yet fiercely known as Stay, operates with a militant, unyielding passion that eerily rivals the early, desperately hungry days of the army, creating a sophisticated, highly organized global network of support that streams, votes, and defends their boys with breathtaking ferocity. Yet, if you strip away the aggressive bass drops, the blinding pyrotechnics, and the explosive choreography, what you find lying beneath is a profound, tender vulnerability that connects on a molecular level with a generation aggressively grappling with anxiety, lost identity, and the daunting, suffocating pressure of an uncertain future. Songs like the painfully raw Elevator, the deeply introspective Levanter, and the emotionally shattering Secret showcase a poignant introspection, proving to the world that they aren't just loud for the sake of being loud, they are profoundly, beautifully human. Bangtan's years of hosting Chan's Room, a weekly live stream where he acted as a late-night therapist and friend to millions around the globe, cemented an emotional bond so deep that it transcends the typical artist-fan dynamic, echoing BTS's magical ability to speak directly to the battered souls of the modern youth. When they stood on the stage of Kingdom Legendary War and fought their way to the bloody top, they proved they have the stamina and the theatrical genius to command any arena. As they continue to aggressively shatter glass ceilings, win major awards like the VMAs, and completely redefine what a modern K-pop performance can physically and emotionally entail, one has to stop and wonder about the absolute limits of their chaotic, brilliant energy. Can a sound this unapologetically aggressive, this distinctly stubbornly them, completely conquer the mainstream pop consciousness in the exact same universally beloved way that Dynamite or Butter did? Or will they forever remain the kings of their own massive alternative empire? Will their relentless self-produced grind lead to an unprecedented, world-shifting artistic evolution? Or is the crushing pressure of constantly having to outdo their own explosive energy a ticking bomb waiting to go off? They are the ultimate disruptors, the dangerous wild cards of this royal succession, holding a massive, terrifyingly loyal chunk of the global music market in the calloused palms of their collared hands. Are they simply the loud, rebellious younger brothers of the industry who are here to shake things up, or are we staring directly into the eyes of the next absolute monarchs of the global music scene, patiently waiting for the perfect, calculated moment to strike and violently claim the gleaming, empty throne for themselves?
Number 6. TXT, the direct heirs, carrying the weight of the world. Imagine being born into a kingdom where your older brother is the most beloved, powerful, and untouchable emperor in the history of the world. This was the paralyzing, suffocating reality that Tomorrow X Together, widely known as TXT, faced the very second their existence was announced to the public. Stepping into the blinding, unforgiving spotlight in 2019 under the massive, imposing shadow of big hit entertainment, Yeonjun, Subin, Bumgyu, Taehyung, and Huninkai were instantly slapped with the monumental, terrifyingly heavy label of BTS's little brothers. Critics and rival fandoms were incredibly quick to brandish the silver spoon narrative, viciously claiming their meteoric rise, highly anticipated debut, and instantly sold-out showcases were merely the inherited spoils of BTS's grueling, blood-soaked labor, actively refusing to acknowledge the agonizing, bone-crushing pressure that comes with an expectation of instant, flawless perfection from day one. But TXT did the exact opposite of what everyone and their mother predicted. Instead of trying to mimic the fierce hip-hop heavy rebellion of their legendary seniors, they debuted with a bright, quirky, and enchantingly weird sound, literally wearing horns on their heads and singing about the confusing, magical, and often isolating agony of puberty in their debut anthem, Crown. This deliberate, wildly unexpected choice was a massive gamble, but it immediately established them as a fresh, distinct entity, completely separate from the bulletproof legacy they were expected to blindly follow. As the world violently shifted into a dark, pandemic-stricken era, so did their deeply intricate musical narrative, beautifully and tragically mirroring the collective trauma, profound isolation, and shattered dreams of Generation Z. They seamlessly transitioned from the hopeful, starry-eyed optimism of the Dream chapter into the turbulent, heartbreaking reality of the Chaos chapter, morphing from cheerful boys into angst-ridden, complex storytellers. They dove headfirst into a pop-punk, grunge-infused rock revival with absolute masterpieces like 0x1 equals Love Song, I Know I Love You, and Loser equals Lover, screaming with bleeding vocal cords about wanting to freeze time, escape the cruel, terrifying responsibilities of adulthood, and find just one single person to trust in a burning, ruined world. This wasn't just a sudden, focus group-tested conceptual shift. It was a desperate, raw cry for help that resonated across the globe, transforming them into the definitive, unquestionable musical voice of a generation that feels entirely lost, chronically online, and deeply misunderstood. And the global music market responded to this vulnerability with an earth-shattering roar of approval, completely validating their unique, deeply emotional trajectory. They absolutely obliterated the fiercely competitive Billboard 200 chart, claiming the highly coveted #1 spot with their mesmerizing, beautifully conceptual album, The Name Chapter Temptation, a body of work that seduced millions with its ethereal, Peter Pan-esque temptation to abandon reality completely and just stay forever young. They didn't just inherit massive stages, they conquered them entirely on their own merit, making history as the very first K-pop group to perform and subsequently headline the colossal, legendary Lollapalooza Festival in Chicago. To witness their Lollapalooza set was to witness history in the making. They commanded a mind-boggling ocean of screaming, crying fans who knew every single intricate lyric, jumping in perfect unison to their rock anthems while the Chicago skyline glowed brightly behind them. Speaking of their incredibly deep lore, their highly interconnected cinematic universe, the Star Seekers, weaves a dark, fantastical narrative of friendship, bitter betrayal, magical abilities, and ultimate doom that keeps their fiercely loyal fandom, MOA, endlessly theorizing, engaging, and emotionally invested on a level that eerily mirrors the obsessive, beautiful madness of the early BTS era. This universe requires absolute commitment from the members, and each one brings an indispensable, unique flavor to this magical concoction. Yeonjun, widely revered as the legendary fourth-gen It Boy, moves with a fluid, terrifyingly captivating arrogance and precision that absolutely demands your undivided attention, constantly setting social media completely on fire with his unparalleled dance challenges and sheer charisma. Subin, the tall, reluctant, but deeply compassionate leader, anchors the entire group with his soothing, warm vocals and heart-melting, empathetic charm that makes him feel like a highly relatable, comforting friend to millions.
Bamgyu acts as the explosive, unpredictable wildcard, seamlessly blending devastating, manga-like visuals with a deep, raspy emotional depth and a chaotic humor that brings genuine, unscripted life to their group dynamics. Taehyung, the razor-sharp intellectual and fiercely driven vocalist of the group, delivers soaring, crystal-clear high notes that pierce straight through the soul, always pushing the group towards vocal perfection. And Kai, the immensely talented musical prodigy who plays multiple instruments, infuses the group with an angelic, multifaceted artistry that constantly keeps critics completely on their toes, proving that their musical foundation is rock solid. Their absolute domination extends far beyond the recording studio. They have violently conquered the high fashion world as well, walking international runways and becoming the first ever group to be named global ambassadors for the legendary luxury house of Dior, proving that their ethereal, prince-like aesthetic is a highly marketable, globally recognized asset. Yet beneath the glittering designer clothes, the meticulously crafted fairy tale concepts, and the massive stadium tours, beats a raw, desperately human heart that continues to bleed openly for the unique struggles of modern youth. They have successfully, undeniably proven that they are not merely riding the coattails of their legendary seniors, but rather they are actively paving a magnificent, entirely distinct golden road of their own making. But as the fierce, bloody battle for the ultimate crown reaches a blinding fever pitch, the suffocating, unavoidable question still violently hangs in the air. Can a group that built its entire massive empire on the fragile, fleeting concept of youth, debilitating growing pains, and Peter Pan syndrome successfully transition into the undeniable, mature kings of the industry without losing the very core of their magical, relatable appeal? Will the impossibly heavy, inescapable shadow of BTS forever be the terrifying glass ceiling they can never quite manage to break through completely? Or are they secretly, quietly forging the ultimate strength and global firepower to step out of that dark shadow completely, eclipse their own powerful creators, and claim the absolute, undisputed throne of the entire K-pop industry for themselves?
Number 5. ATEEZ, the Pirate Kings, conquering the world from the shadows. Imagine starting a terrifying, wildly unpredictable sea voyage in a tiny, fragile wooden boat while the rest of the incredibly wealthy K-pop industry sails confidently by in massive, impenetrable luxury cruise ships. This was the daunting, seemingly impossible reality for ATEEZ when they first crashed onto the music scene in late 2018. Hailing from KQ Entertainment, a small, virtually unknown agency that had absolutely no established reputation, no massive financial backing, no legendary seniors to miraculously pave the way, and definitely no built-in fan base to guarantee their early survival, these 8 fiercely ambitious boys had absolutely nothing to lose and a whole sprawling universe to prove. They weren't born with shiny silver spoons in their mouths. They had to carve their own heavy swords out of pure, unadulterated desperation, endless nights of tear-soaked practice, and an unbreakable willpower that makes their meteoric rise one of the most miraculous, blood-pumping underdog stories since the very early, incredibly difficult days of BTS. If Stray Kids are the chaotic thunder and TXT are the magical, burdened heirs, then ATEEZ are the ruthless, unapologetic pirates of the K-pop industry, sailing completely off the traditional safe map and violently hijacking the global spotlight with a stage presence so intensely raw, so beautifully visceral, and so terrifyingly passionate that it literally leaves massive stadium audiences gasping for air. They didn't politely ask for permission to enter the big leagues. They kicked the heavy, locked door completely off its hinges with their incredibly intricate, lore-heavy pirate concept, wildly wielding prop swords, proudly waving massive black flags, and roaring anthems of rebellion that resonated deeply with misfits, outcasts, and fiercely passionate dreamers all across the globe. At the helm of this unstoppable, soaring pirate ship is Captain Hangjong, a deeply inspiring leader whose relentless work ethic, piercing rap delivery, and undeniable gender-fluid fashion sense make him one of the most fiercely respected artistic visionaries of his entire generation. A young man who literally carries the staggering weight of a small company's entire future and survival on his heavily accessorized, surprisingly sturdy shoulders. Alongside him stands Songhwa, the breathtakingly gorgeous yet fiercely powerful eldest member, whose terrifying duality can seamlessly switch from angelic, comforting grace to absolute demonic, eye-rolling possession in the literal blink of an eye, completely captivating anyone who dares to make eye contact with him during a live performance. But what truly catapulted ATEEZ from a struggling, unknown rookie group into an undeniable, world-conquering global phenomenon is their absolutely insane, bone-breaking performance style, largely defined and spearheaded by the terrifyingly brilliant Choi San, a man who doesn't just flawlessly execute the choreography, but looks as if he is literally being violently possessed by the very music itself, throwing his bruised body around with a reckless, beautiful abandon that completely and forever redefined what it means to be a true stage genius in modern pop culture. Add into this volatile mix the towering, razor-sharp dance precision and calming stability of Yunho, the mesmerizing, statue-like visuals and shockingly deep, resonant tones of Yosong, the incredibly explosive, earth-shaking rap flow and towering swagger of Mingi, the wicked, deeply seductive stage charisma and sharp, witty humor of Wooyoung, and finally the absolute vocal powerhouse that is Jongho, the fiercely talented youngest member who effortlessly belts out skyscraper-shattering, gravity-defying high notes while simultaneously, casually breaking hard apples in half with his bare hands, and you have a perfectly balanced, incredibly lethal weapon of a music group. Unlike many of their privileged peers who built their massive empires starting safely from the heavily guarded domestic Korean market, ATEEZ took the incredibly risky, wildly unconventional route of conquering the harsh, demanding West first, touring relentlessly across America and Europe in small, sweaty, badly ventilated venues during their early expedition tours, building their deeply devoted, fiercely protective fandom ATEEZ, slowly, passionately, brick by brick, and heart by heart. This grassroots, entirely organic international growth is the exact same arduous blueprint that initially propelled BTS to their early international fame, and ATEEZ executed this terrifying strategy with an absolute, blood-chilling perfection. The cold, hard numbers completely and undeniably back up their aggressive, loud claim to the ultimate throne. They have completely shattered the seemingly unbreakable, historically rigid Big Four agency monopoly by scoring a highly coveted, history-making #1 album on the fiercely competitive US Billboard 200 chart with their absolute masterpiece, the world EP.Fin Will, officially and loudly proving to the entire world that you absolutely do not need a massive corporate machine or millions of dollars in marketing behind you if your music, your narrative, and your burning passion are undeniably authentic and real. Furthermore, they permanently etched their names into the eternal golden history books of global music by becoming the very first K-pop boy group to ever officially perform at the legendary, highly prestigious Coachella Valley Music and Arts Festival in 2024, delivering a culturally rich, exhaustingly energetic live band set that proudly featured traditional Korean elements, completely shut down the massive Sahara tent, and had hard-to-please critics and casual locals alike frantically begging to know the names of the 8 men who just set the desert completely on fire. Their incredibly diverse discography is a densely packed, highly cinematic universe of dystopian rebellion, heavily featuring intricate, mind-bending lore about alternate dimensions, oppressive, emotionless regimes, and fighting desperately for the fundamental human right to feel joy, sorrow, and passion in a cold, heavily controlled society.
Tracks like the incredibly epic, soaring, toast-raising Answer, the darkly seductive, heavily synthesized Cyberpunk, the wildly chaotic, unbelievably catchy bouncy K-Hot Chili Peppers, and the utterly majestic, spine-tingling Symphony No. 9 from the Wonderland are not just standard run-of-the-mill K-pop songs. They are dramatic, sweeping theatrical anthems meticulously designed to be screamed at the absolute top of your lungs in massive, sold-out international stadiums. They have fought, bled, sweat, and violently clawed their way out of the dark, suffocating basement of a desperately small agency to stand fiercely shoulder to shoulder with the absolute, untouchable titans of the global music industry, proving once and for all that raw, unfiltered, burning passion can indeed conquer the slickest, most expensive corporate packaging. Yet, as they stand fearlessly on the dizzying precipice of absolute global domination, gripping the heavy wooden wheel of their pirate ship as they sail bravely into uncharted, dangerous waters, we as the audience have to pause and ask the truly hard, uncomfortable questions. Can a group whose entire musical identity and live performance reputation are so deeply intertwined with this dark, intensely dramatic, and insanely physically exhausting concept sustain this terrifying, high-octane momentum over the next decade without completely burning their bodies and minds out? Will they finally be able to completely, undeniably conquer the stubbornly resistant, highly fickle domestic Korean general public and achieve that elusive, universal household recognition that truly defines an absolute, undisputed K-pop king? Or will they forever remain the terrifyingly powerful, highly respected but somewhat isolated rulers of the international underground? As the ultimate glittering crown sits completely unguarded, gleaming brightly in the distance as the current kings step away, are ATEEZ secretly, quietly preparing to unleash a massive, world-ending storm that will completely capsize the current, highly predictable hierarchy and finally allow the absolute underdogs to officially take over the kingdom?
Number 4. ENHYPEN, the Vampire Princes, biting into global stardom. Imagine being trapped in a massive, hyper-futuristic architectural marvel, isolated in the middle of a dense, dark forest, surrounded by dozens of hidden cameras, capturing your every single mistake, your every exhausted tear, and your every moment of crushing self-doubt, all while millions of unseen eyes across the globe judge your worthiness to achieve your ultimate lifelong dream. This was the brutal, psychologically grueling crucible known as Island that violently birthed the phenomenal powerhouse we now know as ENHYPEN. Born directly in the absolute darkest, most isolating depths of the global 2020 pandemic, these 7 individuals didn't just casually form a music group. They were forged in a high-pressure, heavily televised furnace that demanded nothing short of absolute, immediate perfection from teenagers who were barely figuring out who they were. When we analyze the monumental, awe-inspiring legacy that BTS has left behind, we see a beautiful story of struggling boys who found each other in the dark and walked towards the light. But ENHYPEN's origin story is a completely different, equally fascinating beast. They were thrown together by the ruthless, calculating votes of the general public and the strict, unforgiving judgments of industry legends, forced to rapidly transition from fiercely competitive, desperate rivals into an unbreakable, unified brotherhood overnight. Stepping out into a world that was entirely locked down, they debuted to empty, silent broadcast stations, performing their incredibly complex, razor-sharp choreography to cold camera lenses instead of screaming fans, a surreal and haunting beginning that deeply informed their signature, intoxicatingly dark artistic identity. ENHYPEN isn't just selling catchy pop music. They are masterfully weaving a sprawling, seductive, and terrifying dark fantasy narrative deeply rooted in aristocratic vampire lore, boldly exploring mature themes of fatal attraction, the intoxicating heavy burden of newfound power, and crossing forbidden, dangerous boundaries. This isn't the bright, bubbly boy-next-door K-pop you might be used to seeing on your television screens. This is gothic, highly theatrical, blood-pumping cinema brought vividly to life on a massive stage. Their debut track, Given Taken, perfectly encapsulated this heavy, existential angst, asking the profound, deeply personal question of whether their massive instant fame was magically given to them by the fans or violently taken by their own bleeding hands. And boy, did they take it. The septet is an incredibly lethal, perfectly balanced assembly of distinctive, jaw-dropping talents that leaves massive stadium audiences completely mesmerized. You have Haesung, the undeniable, all-rounding ace of the group, whose flawlessly stable, soaring vocals and mesmerizing fluid dance lines set a terrifyingly high standard for the entire fourth generation. Jae, the fiery, passionately outspoken mood maker with a razor-sharp fashion sense and a deeply commanding, raspy vocal tone that cuts right through the heaviest of rock-infused beats. And Jake, the fiercely loyal golden retriever with a secret, dangerous edge, who miraculously transformed from a completely inexperienced trainee into a terrifyingly confident global stage commander with an incredibly distinct, addictive vocal flavor. Then you have Sunghoon, the literal breathtaking ice prince who completely abandoned a highly successful, intensely competitive, decade-long career as a national figure skater to chase a wildly uncertain idol dream, bringing an unparalleled, regal elegance and chilling, breathtaking visuals to every single high-octane performance. Add in the vibrant, emotionally expressive genius of Sunu, whose legendary, terrifyingly quick facial expressions can shift from the brightest, most comforting sunshine to a cold, predatory glare in a fraction of a second. The incredibly young, fiercely determined leader Jungwon, who carries the immense, crushing weight of leading older members with a shocking, quiet maturity and a highly unique, piercingly addictive vocal color. And finally, Nikki, the absolute prodigy, a deeply intimidating dance genius whose body control, raw athletic power, and mesmerizing stage presence echo the legendary greats of pop history, constantly leaving seasoned choreographers and veteran idols completely speechless. This incredibly potent mixture of aristocratic visuals, deeply intoxicating lore, and phenomenal stage presence has allowed ENHYPEN to completely bypass the traditional, slow-burn rookie phase and immediately explode into a record-breaking global touring juggernaut. We are talking about a fiercely ambitious group that managed to sell out massively prestigious venues like the Kyocera Dome in Japan and headline colossal open-air stadiums across Asia and the United States on their breathtaking Fate Tour, performing to oceans of screaming engines before they even had the chance to properly celebrate their third anniversary. Their carefully crafted albums, from the bloody Shakespearean tragedy of Border Carnival to the incredibly angsty, rock-heavy masterpiece of Manifesto Day One and the deeply seductive, fatalistic allure of Dark Blood, Orange Blood, and Romance Untold, have consistently smashed through the highly coveted millions sold mark, repeatedly conquering the uppermost echelons of the Billboard 200 chart with terrifying ease. Their musical evolution is a fascinating, highly educational case study in artistic growth. They didn't just stick to a single, safe formula. They bravely experimented with aggressive, old-school hip-hop beats in Future Perfect Pass the Mic, embraced the sweeping, emotional grandeur of retro synth-pop in Criminal Love, and constantly pushed their vocal boundaries, proving they are far more than just a visually stunning performance group. The emotional connection they share with their massive fan base is deeply profound and intensely symbiotic. Because the fans literally created the group through their votes, there is an underlying fiercely protective bond that beautifully mirrors the legendary, deeply devoted relationship between BTS and ARMY. This fandom doesn't just casually listen to their music on the way to school. They analyze every single music video frame for hidden clues, fiercely debate the intricate, mind-bending timelines of their dark webtoon, Dark Moon, The Blood Altar, and mobilize with terrifying military-like precision to shatter global streaming records. They have fully embraced their unique Gothic Prince identity, collaborating with major luxury fashion houses like Prada, proving that their dark, elegant aesthetic is fiercely sought after by the global mainstream market.
Yet beneath the red velvet capes, the fake blood, the intense jaw-dropping dance breaks, and the aristocratic vampire prince persona lies a deeply relatable, vulnerable core of 7 young men frantically trying to navigate the terrifying, suffocating pressures of sudden, monumental global fame. They actively bridge the massive gap between fantasy and reality, releasing absolute, undeniable pop anthems like Polaroid Love and the incredibly controversial, internet-breaking Bite Me, which introduced highly sensual couple choreography that aggressively pushed the notoriously conservative boundaries of the K-pop industry and proved they are absolutely not afraid to take massive, career-defining risks to elevate their art. As they stand right at the bleeding edge of the industry, backed by the colossal, unstoppable corporate machine of HYBE, but completely determined to carve out their own distinctly dark, blood-soaked path, they are staring directly at the empty, glittering throne with piercing, hungry eyes. But as their massive, passionate fandom continues to aggressively multiply across the globe, we have to ask the incredibly difficult, burning questions. Can a group whose entire massively successful identity is so heavily steeped in such a specific, darkly fantastical, and highly theatrical vampire lore successfully cross over to intimately capture the hearts of the everyday casual music listener and achieve absolute, undeniable mainstream pop supremacy? Will the crushing, unavoidable weight of being born from a ruthless survival show and existing under the massive, ever-present umbrella of the very company that built BTS eventually become a suffocating box they can never truly escape? Or are they secretly, meticulously gathering the exact amount of global firepower, relentless passion, and undeniable artistry needed to completely eclipse all expectations, shatter the ceiling, and violently sink their teeth into the ultimate K-pop crown?
Number 3. ZEROBASEONE, The Miracle Project, shattering every debut record. Imagine waking up in a world where the concept of a K-pop survival show has been completely exhausted, dragged through the mud by massive voting manipulation scandals, and widely dismissed by the general public as a tired, predictable, and emotionally manipulative corporate cash grab. This was the highly skeptical, incredibly cynical landscape that the immensely ambitious project Boys Planet had to fiercely battle against in early 2023. Yet, from the ashes of this immense public doubt and industry fatigue, a blinding, undeniable miracle was born. A 9-member colossal titan known as ZEROBASEONE, affectionately and widely referred to as ZB1, a group that didn't just casually debut, but aggressively detonated a massive, record-shattering nuclear bomb right in the very center of the brand-new 5th-generation K-pop battleground. When we talk about the immense, heavy, and practically mythical crown left gleaming by BTS, we usually look to groups that have slowly, painfully built their empires over years of relentless touring, grueling obscurity, and slow-burn artistic evolution. But ZEROBASEONE completely and violently flipped that traditional script upside down, achieving a level of instant, terrifying, and monumental commercial success that had literal industry veterans, seasoned chart analysts, and rival company executives completely dropping their jaws in absolute, unadulterated disbelief. Before they even stepped onto a single official broadcast stage, before they even had a polished music video out for the world to see, these 9 individuals were making historical, earth-shattering waves that completely redefined what it means to be a rookie. They achieved the utterly unimaginable, historically unprecedented feat of becoming the very first K-pop group in the entire decades-long history of the notoriously cutthroat Korean music industry to successfully surpass 2 million pre-orders for their debut album, Youth in the Shade, a staggering, monumental statistic that completely bypassed the usual struggling rookie phase and instantly placed them on the exact same commercial playing field as the absolute biggest, most established, and heavily backed names in the entire globe.
But this breathtaking, meteoric rise to the absolute summit of the charts wasn't just handed to them by a lucky stroke of fate or a massive corporate marketing budget. It was forged in the agonizing, deeply emotional, and intensely stressful crucible of a heavily televised survival show where the stakes were literally life and death for their fragile idol dreams. At the glorious, incredibly historic center of this massive cultural phenomenon stands Zhang Hao, a fiercely talented, deeply emotional musical prodigy who made absolute television history by becoming the very first non-Korean contestant to win the highly coveted #1 spot on an Mnet survival show, completely shattering long-standing cultural barriers and fiercely proving that undeniable talent and pure, radiating authentic charm can entirely transcend borders, languages, and deep-seated industry prejudices. Right beside him, sharing an incredibly deep, deeply compelling, and practically cinematic rival-turned-brother dynamic is the deeply beloved, undeniably perfect leader, Sunghan Bin, a former background dancer whose flawless, angelic visuals, incredibly stable, soothing vocals, and fiercely compassionate, deeply empathetic leadership style make him the absolute quintessential heart and soul of the entire group. This incredibly powerful, heavily shipped central duo is fiercely supported by an incredibly diverse, perfectly balanced roster of immense, undeniable talent. The incredibly charismatic, deeply experienced, and fiercely loyal Kim Ji-woong, who fought through years of heartbreaking, agonizing failures, dissolving groups, and shattered dreams to finally claim his rightful, hard-earned spot on the massive stage. The breathtaking, wildly unpredictable, and fiercely energetic Seok Matthew, whose infectious, radiant smile and undeniably smooth vocal tone bring a vital, energetic freshness to their heavy, emotional sound. The incredibly solid, razor-sharp dance prodigy Park Gun-wook, whose intimidating, massive physical presence beautifully and shockingly contrasts with his incredibly tender, deeply emotional, and surprisingly soft personality. The deeply graceful, highly technical, and incredibly elegant Kim Tae-rae, whose soaring, deeply emotional vocal belt serves as the unbreakable melodic backbone of their most complex tracks. The incredibly charming, deeply captivating Ricky, whose viral, young and rich, tall and handsome persona beautifully masks a fiercely dedicated, relentlessly hard-working perfectionist who refuses to be boxed in by his striking visuals. The incredibly sharp, deeply focused, and highly versatile Kim Yu-vin, whose long-limbed, explosive dance lines completely mesmerize the massive crowds, and whose chaotic humor glues the members together. And finally, the fiercely talented, incredibly brave youngest member, Han Yoo-jin, a teenager who bravely carries the massive, crushing pressure of a global spotlight with a shocking, quiet maturity that leaves veteran idols and strict choreographers completely speechless. Their sound, a beautiful, nostalgic, yet incredibly fresh blend of deeply emotional drum and bass, soaring pop melodies, and intricate, fast-paced choreography, perfectly captures the fleeting, incredibly beautiful, yet inherently tragic nature of youth, a profound thematic choice that deeply resonates with their massive, fiercely dedicated fandom, ZEROBASEONE. This beautifully tragic undertone is not just a clever boardroom-crafted marketing concept, it is the absolute terrifying reality of their very existence. Unlike the other massive contenders fiercely fighting for the ultimate K-pop crown, ZEROBASEONE is a project group, permanently bound by a strict, relentlessly ticking, and deeply cruel 2.5-year contract that hangs heavily over their every single triumphant victory, like a dark, suffocating, inescapable cloud. This incredibly tight, rapidly vanishing time frame creates an atmosphere of sheer, unadulterated desperation and incredibly high emotional stakes that entirely fuels their massive fandom to stream harder, vote faster, organize better, and scream louder than anyone else in the entire industry, desperately trying to cram a lifetime of monumental achievements, massive stadium tours, and major prize award history into mere 30 fleeting months. Their incredibly explosive arrival on the scene has not just shifted the tectonic plates of the industry, it has completely obliterated the established, comfortable timeline that older, more established groups were comfortably relying on to slowly secure their own succession. ZB1 has forced every single major entertainment company to frantically rush back to their boardroom drawing tables, terrified by the sheer, undeniable speed at which this 9-member juggernaut has managed to capture the absolute loyalty and massive financial backing of the global public. But this deep emotional connection to the fans is beautifully amplified by their constant, highly engaging, and deeply authentic social media presence, where they willingly strip away the intimidating, hyper-perfect idol veneer to bravely show the exhausted, giggling, beautifully human boys who were just as overwhelmed, terrified, and incredibly grateful for their sudden, monumental theme as the fans are themselves. This magical, intensely parasocial bond is the exact same highly potent emotional fuel that originally launched BTS into the absolute global stratosphere, proving that while ZEROBASEONE might have taken a vastly different, highly televised, and incredibly public path to the main stage, they have completely mastered the deeply essential art of connecting directly and intimately with the human soul.
Number 2. NCT Dream, the child prodigies, awakening the giant. Imagine being thrust into the blinding, unforgiving, and hyper-competitive spotlight of the massive global music industry when you are barely old enough to legally drive a car, strictly tasked with executing impossibly complex, razor-sharp choreography on entirely unstable, highly dangerous electronic hoverboards, while simultaneously singing perfectly stable, high-pitched pop melodies with the flawless precision of seasoned veterans. This was the absolutely mind-boggling, reality-defying debut of NCT Dream back in the historically significant year of 2016. Hailing from the colossal, legendary corporate powerhouse of SM Entertainment, this specific unit was initially, quite cruelly, designed as a highly experimental, constantly rotating and emotionally taxing youth-centric project, deeply rooted in an incredibly harsh, anxiety-inducing graduation system, where members were legally and forcibly required to permanently leave the deeply beloved group the very exact second they turned 20 years old. When we look deeply into the legendary, monumental history of BTS, we see a unified, unbreakable band of brothers who clung desperately to each other to survive the absolute darkest, most terrifying storms of the unforgiving idol industry. But the 7 boys of NCT Dream, Mark, Renjun, Jeno, Haechan, Jimin, Chenle, and Jisung, were fundamentally, tragically built on a heartbreakingly unstable foundation that literally promised their eventual forced separation from the very start. They didn't just have to battle rival groups, incredibly demanding critics, and exhausting schedules. They had to desperately, agonizingly fight against the cruel, unstoppable passage of time itself. For years, the fiercely protective, deeply traumatized fandom, affectionately known as NCTzens, watched in absolute gut-wrenching horror and shed endless oceans of genuine tears as their beloved leader and emotional anchor, Mark Lee, was actually forced to graduate, leaving the remaining 6 members completely devastated, performing highly emotional, tear-drenched farewell concerts that felt more like tragic funerals for a shattered dream than a celebration of music. But what the highly calculative, cold-hearted corporate boardroom executives completely, utterly failed to anticipate was the incredibly profound, deeply unshakable, and fiercely organic bond that these literal children had formed with each other, and, by extension, with a massively growing, fiercely defiant global audience.
The sheer, unadulterated public outcry, the millions of desperately organized petitions, and the massive, undeniably explosive commercial success of their temporary 6-member releases violently forced the massive SM corporate machine to do something completely unprecedented, historically shocking, and absolutely miraculous in the rigid, deeply stubborn K-pop industry. They entirely abolished the cruel graduation concept, officially reinstated Mark into the permanent lineup, and violently resurrected NCT Dream as a fixed, completely unbreakable, 7-member titanic juggernaut. This monumental, industry-shaking victory wasn't just a simple corporate restructuring. It was the explosive, highly emotional catalyst that entirely unleashed the sleeping, terrifying giant that the group was always desperately meant to be. The absolute earth-shattering moment they released their first full-length 7-member album, Hot Sauce, they didn't just casually climb the highly competitive music charts, they violently, aggressively obliterated them, selling over 2 million physical copies in absolute record time, and firmly establishing themselves as the undeniable, undisputed commercial backbone of their entire legendary agency. This staggering, mind-boggling momentum only grew more fiercely terrifying with monumental, history-making masterpieces like Glitch Mode, Beatbox, and the incredibly massive, record-shattering ISTJ, effortlessly raking in millions upon millions of pre-orders and fiercely demanding absolute, unyielding respect from every single corner of the globe. What makes their aggressive, highly legitimate claim to the ultimate glittering K-pop crown so incredibly unique, deeply compelling, and practically unbeatable is their deeply authentic, intensely documented coming-of-age narrative. The world literally watched them grow up on high-definition television screens. They miraculously transformed right before our very eyes, from high-pitched, adorable children blowing bubblegum into towering, heavily muscled, fiercely charismatic young men executing deeply seductive, highly mature, and aggressively powerful concepts without ever losing that crucial, underlying magical spark of their original youthful brotherhood. Mark is widely, fiercely revered as one of the absolute greatest, most prolific, and hardest-working rappers in the entire decades-long history of SM entertainment, possessing a razor-sharp, heavily syncopated flow that completely commands absolute attention. Haechan possesses a deeply intoxicating, incredibly unique, and undeniably honey-coated vocal tone that serves as the absolute melodic signature of their entire discography. Jano and Jimin have astonishingly morphed into breathtaking, dangerously captivating visual centers with incredibly deep, aggressive rap tones that perfectly balance the group's sonic identity. Renjun acts as the beautifully elegant, highly emotional vocal anchor, whose soaring, delicate notes pierce straight through the heaviest instrumentation. Chenle, the literal musical prodigy, belts out earth-shattering, incredibly stable high notes with a terrifying casual ease. And Jisung, the fiercely talented, incredibly shy youngest member, who started out as a literal musical prodigy, has astonishingly evolved into a terrifyingly powerful, deeply commanding main dancer whose explosive, bone-breaking movements entirely anchor their intense choreography. They have violently outgrown the small, heavily restricted broadcasting stations and have spectacularly conquered the absolute biggest, most highly coveted, and historically significant touring venues on the entire Asian continent, including completely selling out the massive, legendary Jamsil Olympic Stadium, a highly exclusive, impossibly massive arena that is strictly reserved for the absolute top-tier, untouchable pantheon of musical gods, effectively proving they can easily pull the exact same massive, awe-inspiring crowds as their legendary seniors. Their deeply powerful, historically rich narrative beautifully mirrors the exact same agonizing growing pains, rebellious youth, and ultimate triumph that characterized BTS's legendary HYHY era, giving them a profoundly deep, incredibly emotional, and highly authentic connection with a massive, desperately loyal generation of fans who literally grew up right alongside them. Yet, as they stand incredibly tall, fiercely united and heavily decorated with countless massive Daesong awards at the very summit of the brutal K-pop hierarchy, we are violently forced to ask the incredibly challenging, practically impossible questions that completely define this incredibly intense, high-stakes battle for succession. Can a group whose entire foundational massive identity was so deeply, heavily intertwined with the concept of innocent, fleeting adolescence ever truly completely convince the broader, highly cynical global market that they are now the absolute, mature, and undeniably supreme kings of the entire music industry? Will their highly complex, deeply integrated affiliation with the massive, often confusing and highly sprawling, overarching NCT brand universe tragically hinder their ability to be completely recognized as a singular, entirely standalone and absolutely unrivaled global phenomenon on the exact same universal level as BTS? Or have these literal child prodigies finally secretly gathered the absolute immense, world-ending firepower required to completely awaken the sleeping dragon, violently shatter every single preconceived notion about their past, and loudly claim the absolute, undisputed, and eternal crown of the entire K-pop empire for themselves?
Number 1. 17. The self-producing titans, breaking every paradigm. Imagine being completely trapped in a tiny, suffocating, aggressively green basement practice studio, affectionately but grimly dubbed the Malona Room, where 13 incredibly anxious, desperately hopeful teenagers practically lived on top of one another, sweating profusely through their cheap clothes and acutely aware that their deeply struggling agency, Pledis Entertainment, was teetering dangerously on the absolute brink of total financial ruin. This was the incredibly humbling, painfully difficult, and practically hopeless origin story of 17, the colossal, untouchable performance titans who currently stand as the absolute, undisputed closest contenders to the gleaming, heavily guarded throne left behind by BTS. When we talk about true, undeniable industry domination, we cannot merely look at viral internet moments or sudden spikes in digital streaming. We have to look at the massive, terrifyingly solid empires built brick by agonizing brick, and absolutely no one in the modern K-pop landscape has built a foundation as impossibly sturdy, deeply complex, and completely autonomous as these 13 men. They were thrown into an incredibly saturated, highly unforgiving market in 2015 with a bizarre, highly risky concept: 13 members divided into 3 highly specialized subunits: hip-hop, vocal, and performance, who miraculously combined to form one single, cohesive, unbreakable team. But what truly set them fundamentally apart from the massive sea of heavily manufactured, meticulously corporate packaged idol groups was their absolute, terrifyingly brilliant necessity to self-produce. They literally had to write their own songs and meticulously choreograph their own intricate routines because their agency simply did not have the massive financial resources to buy expensive tracks from famous producers. At the very glowing genius core of this massive, self-sustaining ecosystem is Woozi, the incredibly brilliant, deeply intense vocal team leader and main producer who has spent literally thousands of sleepless, agonizingly stressful nights locked inside his Universe Factory studio, single-handedly carrying the immense, crushing weight of 13 separate careers on his shoulders, while meticulously crafting some of the absolute greatest, most defining pop anthems of the last decade. Right beside him stands S. Coops, the fiercely protective, deeply empathetic general leader who acts as the ultimate unbreakable shield for his members against the harsh, notoriously exploitative industry executives, and Hoshi, the absolute mad genius of the performance unit, whose terrifyingly strict, highly demanding choreography sessions transform 13 wildly different individuals into a single, terrifyingly synchronized organism that moves with the flawless, breathtaking precision of a military unit.
The sheer, overwhelming magnitude of talent within this massive group is practically incomprehensible. You have the deeply resonant, emotionally shattering vocals of DK and Seungkwan, two of the absolute greatest, most highly respected powerhouse vocalists in the entire industry, who can effortlessly belt out skyscraper-shattering high notes while simultaneously executing grueling dance breaks. You have the angelic, beautifully distinct, and highly comforting tones of Jonghan and Joshua, who provide the essential, soothing melodic anchors to their heavy sound. The hip-hop unit delivers an incredibly diverse, deeply lethal sonic assault, featuring Wonwoo's dangerously low, highly captivating cavernous voice, Mingyu's explosive, towering global it-boy charisma and deeply commanding stage presence, and Vernon's incredibly unique, razor-sharp, heavily stylized bilingual flow that instantly elevates every single track. And completing the absolute visual and physical masterpiece of their stage presence are June, whose sweeping, majestic lines and breathtaking cinematic visuals demand absolute attention. The eighth, the deeply artistic, highly expressive fashion icon whose movements resemble beautiful contemporary poetry in motion. And Dino, the incredibly tireless, fiercely talented youngest member who constantly pushes the absolute physical boundaries of what K-pop choreography can realistically achieve. 17 did not experience an overnight sudden explosion into global superstardom. Their rise was a terrifyingly steady, unstoppable, and deeply organic ascent, aggressively climbing the highly competitive charts year after year, fundamentally proving that slow and steady absolutely conquers the entire world. They transitioned seamlessly from the bright, highly energetic, and incredibly refreshing theatricality of early masterpieces like Adore You and the eternally legendary, heavily played Very Nice into deeply mature, aggressively powerful, and sonically massive stadium anthems like Hot, Super, and the incredibly intricate, conceptually dark masterpiece Maestro. The cold, hard, absolutely indisputable numbers surrounding their recent massive campaigns are enough to give even the most cynical industry analysts severe vertigo. They accomplished the historically unprecedented, utterly unimaginable feat of selling over 6 million physical copies of their masterpiece mini-album FML, completely and violently shattering the all-time K-pop record previously held by BTS themselves, a monumental, earth-shattering achievement that fundamentally shifted the entire balance of power within the global music industry. They have completely conquered the absolute biggest, most highly coveted, and practically mythical touring venues across the globe, from headlining the legendary Glastonbury Festival in the UK with a culturally rich, exhaustingly energetic live band set, to entirely selling out the colossal, impossibly massive Nissan Stadium in Japan and executing massive US stadium runs during their awe-inspiring Right Here and New tours, drawing in oceans of hundreds of thousands of fiercely devoted fans who wave their glowing carrot bongs in absolute, tear-inducing unison. Their massive global fandom, Carrot, operates with a deeply loving, incredibly organized, and fiercely loyal passion, perfectly mirroring the group's own heavily emphasized message of unbreakable unity, deep familial love, and fighting through the absolute darkest times together. In an industry notoriously plagued by the dreaded 7-year curse, where massive groups tragically fracture and disband due to internal conflicts or unfair corporate contracts, 17 achieved the absolute, historically miraculous feat of all 13 members completely renewing their contracts early, violently proving to the entire world that their brotherhood is absolutely not a carefully crafted marketing illusion, but a deeply real, unbreakable bond forged in blood, sweat, and genuine tears. Yet as they stand incredibly tall and heavily decorated at the absolute dizzying pinnacle of the mountain, holding the entire music industry comfortably in the palms of their hands, they are currently facing their absolute biggest, most daunting challenge yet, the highly dreaded, practically unavoidable military enlistment era, which has gracefully transitioned crucial pillars like Jonghan and S-Coups effectively away from the massive stage. This massive, inevitable transition period violently forces us to confront the incredibly heavy, deeply fascinating questions that completely define the ultimate climax of this spectacular, high-stakes documentary narrative.